And I'm Faith Jassy, and we start with this today at 4. We're learning a lot more about a shooting that killed a 14-year-old and sent a 12-year-old to the hospital.
21 Savage has reacted after his young nephew tragically took his own life, and the circumstances surrounding this loss are far more devastating than most people realize.
Just that fast, the boy had made the decision to kill himself. He probably sat up there and thought, I'm finna go to jail. They gonna ridicule me. Everybody gonna be doing this, that. And he couldn't take it.
A 14-year-old boy is gone. His little sister is in a hospital bed fighting to survive. And a family that was already deep in grief before any of this happened is now being asked to bury someone else they love. The full story involves a chain of heartbreak that no headline can capture. And 21 Savage's response to it all has left people at a loss for words. Yo, what's good, fam? Before we get into today's script, real talk, if anything in this story hits close to home, if you or somebody you know is struggling after a loss or a traumatic event, please reach out. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call or text 988. Now let's get into it. Here's what we are breaking down today. We are going to talk about who this young man was, what his real relationship with 21 Savage looked like, and the heartbreaking sequence of events that unfolded in Stockbridge, Georgia. We are going to get into the losses this family had already been carrying before this happened, because that context changes everything. We are going to cover the condition of his younger sister, how 21 Savage responded, and why this story has resonated so deeply with people far beyond the hip-hop world. Stay with us, because this one deserves the full picture. Behind the name recognition, behind everything you think you know about this story from the headlines, there is a grandmother raising her voice from the deepest pain a person can feel. There is a 12-year-old girl lying in a hospital bed fighting for her life. There is a community in Stockbridge, Georgia that woke up one Wednesday afternoon and will never be the same. And there is a 14-year-old boy named Seven whose story deserves to be told with the care and the respect that it demands. Now, before we even talk about the tragedy itself, let us talk about who 21 Savage is as a person, not just as an artist. Because if you only know him from his music, from the chart-topping records and the sharp-edged rap persona, you might not know how much of his public identity is actually rooted in something deeply personal. Family is not just a word for 21 Savage. It is the foundation of everything he has built and everything he has survived. He grew up in Atlanta, navigating environments that took people he loved. He lost his best friend Royalty on his 21st birthday in a shooting that also left him with 6 bullet wounds. He came out the other side and became one of the biggest rappers in the world. But through all of it, the platinum records, the ICE detention in 2019, the legal battles, the fame, the people closest to him have consistently said that the man behind the music is someone who takes family seriously, someone who remembers faces, someone who keeps people close. And that matters here because context is everything. 21 Savage is someone who has spoken openly in interviews about how the trauma of his early life shaped his entire worldview. He did not just survive the streets of Atlanta, he was remade by what those streets took from him and what he had to build in place of what was lost. His music has always had an undercurrent of grief running beneath the bravado. That grief is not performance. It is documented. It is real. So when a new loss enters his orbit, especially a loss involving a young person, especially a loss that connects the specific horrors of gun violence and mental health crisis, it is not hitting a man who is unfamiliar with pain. It is hitting a man who already knows exactly how deep that well goes. So when family members describe Shirley as being like a nephew to 21 Savage, that is not just a loose connection being used to generate attention. That is a relationship rooted in real proximity, real love, and real history. 21 Savage had shared photographs of Seven when Seven was younger, and those close to the family confirmed that the bond between them was genuine. Seven was not just some distant name in the family tree. He was someone the rapper knew, someone the rapper was connected to, and someone whose passing has hit the Savage household the way only real loss can hit you. Shirley was 14 years old. His grandmother, Sharon Smith, had been raising him since he was 11 months old. Let that land for a second. 11 months old. Sharon Smith was not just his grandmother in the technical sense. She was his primary caregiver, his home base, the person he showed up for every single day. Family members described Seven as a young man who was devoted to her. According to his grandmother herself, she said there was nothing in this world he would not do for her. He would push her wheelchair when her body was giving her trouble. He would show her love without hesitation. He was, by every account, a child who loved deeply and was loved deeply in return. And that is who was at the center of this tragedy. Not a stranger, not a cautionary tale, a 14-year-old boy who pushed his grandmother's wheelchair and called her his everything. Now let us talk about what happened, because the facts of this case are public. They have been reported by local news outlets including 11 Alive and WSB-TV in Atlanta, and the family has spoken openly about their account of events. On a Wednesday afternoon in Stockbridge, Georgia, on Lakeview Place, Seven Shirley was inside the family home when a handgun was discharged. Investigators and family members both indicate the shooting was accidental. Seven's 12-year-old sister, Lyric Shirley, was struck in the neck. She was transported to a hospital immediately. First responders arrived on scene and found a scene that no one should ever have to see. Neighbors told local reporters they watched paramedics working on Lyric near the front door of the home. For Seven, those moments after the gun went off must have been unbearable. The family has been open about what they believe he was feeling. His grandmother Sharon Smith spoke publicly, and her words were as raw and real as anything you will hear. She said she believed that Seven sat in that moment and thought about what was going to happen next. The consequences, the way people would react, the way he would be seen. She said, in her own words, that he probably thought he was going to jail, that people were going to ridicule him. And according to those who were there, he could not take it. Seven died by suicide that same afternoon. He was 14 years old. When Henry County authorities responded to the scene, they found Seven with a fatal gunshot wound. His sister Lyric was transported to the hospital in critical condition. The community was in shock, but here is where it gets real. And this part of the story is something that every single person watching needs to understand. Because what Seven was carrying in that moment was not just the weight of that afternoon. He had been carrying something much heavier for much longer, and nobody had been able to reach him in time to help him set it down. Weeks before that Wednesday in Stockbridge, the Shirley family had already been torn open by loss. Seven's cousin, 13-year-old DeMarcus Shirley, had been killed in a drive-by shooting in DeKalb County. DeMarcus was spending the night with friends when the shooting happened. He was 13 years old, a child, gone, and Seven knew him. Seven grew up near him. Seven had to absorb that loss the same way the rest of the family did, except Seven was 14 and still figuring out how to be in the world. That is two young people from the same family, both teenagers, both gone within weeks of each other. The Shirley family was already in mourning when this happened. They were already grieving DeMarcus when Seven picked up that gun. They were already in a kind of pain that most families never experience once, let alone twice in a single month. And according to family members, that was not all. Reports indicate that Seven had also recently lost a close friend from his community to gun violence. And here's the detail that pulls everything together. Family members told reporters that Seven purchased that handgun off the street for approximately $200 shortly after his friend was killed. Think about what that tells you about where his head was. He was a grieving 14-year-old who had just watched someone his age get taken by the streets, and his response was to try to protect himself. That is not a criminal mind. That is a scared kid trying to navigate a world that had already taken too much from him. So within a compressed window of time, a period that should have been summer, should have been ordinary, should have been 14-year-old things, Seven had lost his cousin to a drive-by, lost a close friend to community violence, armed himself out of fear, and was carrying all of that grief without the kind of support that could have helped him set it down. The weight on that child's shoulders was real. It was documented. It was known to people around him, and it ultimately became too much. Mental health professionals who speak broadly about situations like this, one, not about Seven specifically, but about the pattern, are consistent about what accumulated trauma does to a young person's brain. Adolescents do not process grief and fear and guilt the same way adults do. Their decision-making systems are still developing. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse regulation, long-term thinking, and consequence assessment, is not fully formed until a person is in their mid-20s. That is not an excuse for any behavior. It is a biological fact that helps explain why a teenager in a sudden moment of overwhelming panic and guilt is not operating with the same emotional toolkit as an adult. When you stack loss on top of loss on top of loss, and then add a sudden traumatic incident into the middle of all of that, the emotional response can escalate to a crisis point faster than anyone around that young person can recognize or respond to. Experts consistently note that young people who have experienced repeated community violence, who have lost loved ones suddenly and violently, are at significantly elevated risk for mental health emergencies. The research is clear, the community conversations are clear, and the Shirley family is now living proof of why those conversations matter. What makes this dimension of the story especially painful is that Seven was not invisible to the people around him. His grandmother knew him. His family knew him. He was described as warm, devoted, connected. He was not someone who had been abandoned or forgotten. He was someone who was loved and present. But love alone, as real as it is not always enough to interrupt a mental health crisis when it hits. That is not a failure of the family. That is the reality of what community trauma does when it goes unaddressed at a systemic level. The family did not have the resources, the timing, or the warning to intervene in those moments. And Seven did not have the language, the tools, or the emotional experience to find another path through what he was feeling. That gap between what a grieving young person needs and what is actually available to them in the community is where tragedies like this one live. Now let us talk about the question that Sharon Smith asked publicly, and it is the question a lot of people have been asking since this story broke. How did Seven get the gun? Family members told reporters that they had been informed Seven allegedly purchased the handgun on the street for approximately $200. $200. A 14-year-old boy in Stockbridge, Georgia, was reportedly able to acquire an illegal firearm from the underground market for $200. And the family wants the community to sit with that. Not as a political statement, not as a talking point, but as a reality. Because Seven is not the first young person in this country to get access to a weapon through informal channels, and he will not be the last unless something changes. 21 Savage's own statement following the news spoke directly to this. The rapper did not issue a lengthy formal public announcement in the immediate aftermath, but he did share something, and the words he chose are significant. He wrote about preparing for Seven's homegoing celebration. He addressed the public directly and asked for privacy on behalf of his family during what he called an incredibly difficult time. He asked for prayers for Lyric, describing her as fighting for her life. And then, and this is the part that cut through the grief and said something directly to the community, he called on people to help get guns off the streets. He said too many young lives are being taken. That was not a political campaign. That was a father figure. That was a man who watched a 14-year-old he loved go down a road that ended in tragedy and who used the only platform he had to say something that mattered. Real talk, that statement from 21 Savage reflects something about who he is that a lot of people do not always see in the public eye. This is a man who came up in the same streets, who knows what it means for a young person to have access to something they should not have, who has been shot himself, who has lost people himself, and who still, even in the middle of his own grief, turned around and spoke to the community about what needs to change. That takes something. That takes character. Meanwhile, Lyric Shirley has been fighting. The family confirmed that she underwent multiple surgeries involving her neck and vocal cords. At the time of reporting, she had already gone through 3 surgical procedures. Her family is by her side. She is a 12-year-old girl who experienced something that no child should ever go through, and she is recovering in a hospital while simultaneously processing the loss of her older brother. The emotional and physical weight on Lyric is something the family has asked the public to keep in prayer, and rightfully so. The family has not shared a projected timeline for her return home, and that is their business to share when and if they choose to. But let us sit with that for a second, fam. Lyric is 12 years old. She woke up that Wednesday as a kid. She went through what she went through in a matter of seconds. She went into surgery. She went through 2 more surgeries after that. And somewhere in the middle of recovering from a gunshot wound to the neck, she found out her brother was gone. That is a weight no adult could carry easily. For a 12-year-old, it is uncharted emotional territory. The family has asked for prayers for Lyric's healing, physical healing, and everything else that is going to have to come after it. The road ahead for her is long, and the Shirley family is walking it with her one day at a time. Whatever your beliefs are, send something in her direction. She deserves a full recovery and a future that is bigger than what this week tried to take from her. What the family has shared publicly is a request, a specific, clear, deeply human request. They are not asking for attention. They are not asking for media coverage. They are asking for privacy. They are asking for prayers, and they are asking their community to do something about the pipeline that puts illegal guns in the hands of children. That is their message coming out of this tragedy. Honor our loss by doing something that protects the next family. The public response to this story has been wide. People across social media and across the hip-hop community expressed grief and sympathy the moment the story broke. Artists sent condolences. Community members in Stockbridge came forward to speak about Seven and his family. Mental health advocates used the moment to amplify resources and conversations about what youth in traumatized communities need. Not tomorrow, not after the next tragedy, but right now. The story resonated because it is not abstract. It is not a statistic, it is a grandmother. It is a little girl with 3 surgeries. It is a 14-year-old who loved the people around him and was breaking under the weight of what he had seen. But here's where it gets real. The reaction from everyday people, from strangers who had never heard the name Seven Shirley before this week, was something different. There was something about this story that stripped away all the noise and just left people sitting with the weight of it. Because the details are not sensational. They are heartbreakingly ordinary in the worst way possible. A kid got access to a gun. An accident happened in a moment. A family that was already grieving got hit again. That is a story that is playing out in communities across this country over and over and over again. And most of the time, it does not reach this many people because there is no famous name attached to it. The Shirley family's tragedy broke through in a way that a lot of similar families' tragedies do not. And the hope, if there is any hope to find in a story like this, is that the people who heard about Seven will now hear about the next family before they become a headline. Sharon Smith's voice has been the emotional anchor of this story, and if you have not heard her speak, her words carry everything. She described Seven in terms of who he was to her, the child who showed up for her, the child she raised from infancy, the child whose love was unconditional. And in the same breath, she described the impossibility of understanding how this happened, the pain of losing someone that fast, the questions that do not have good answers. She also went on record asking how a 14-year-old was able to get his hands on the gun in the first place. That question is not rhetorical. It is the central thread running through everything the Shirley family has said publicly since this story broke. They are grieving, yes, but they are also demanding accountability from the community, from the systems around these children, and from anyone who has the power to make it harder for a scared teenager to buy a weapon on the street for $200. She is a grandmother in grief, and she has chosen to speak publicly not because it is easy, but because she wants people to understand what her family has lost and what this community keeps losing. And that brings us back to 21 Savage, because at the end of the day, that is the name that drew many of you to this video, and that is the name that now carries a different kind of weight. 21 Savage is one of the most recognizable rappers on the planet. He has 4 consecutive #1 albums. He has survived things that would have broken most people. And right now, he is planning a homegoing celebration for a 14-year-old he called his nephew. That is where the story lands. Not in a chart position, not in a beef. In a funeral home in Georgia. In a hospital room where a 12-year-old is fighting. In a grandmother's house where Seven's absence is everywhere at once. Fame does not protect you from this. Success does not insulate you from this. The grief that hits a family when a child is gone hits just as hard whether your name is known around the world or not. And the circumstances that led to Seven being in that position, the access to illegal firearms, the accumulated community trauma, the gaps in mental health support for young people who have seen too much, those are not unique to the Shirley family. Those are conditions that exist in communities across this country. And the fact that it takes a tragedy connected to a famous name for those conversations to reach a broader audience is itself something worth thinking about. Seven Shirley was 14 years old. He pushed his grandmother's wheelchair. He loved his family without conditions. He was connected to one of the biggest artists in hip-hop, not as a storyline, but as a real relationship between real people. He had already been grieving before that Wednesday afternoon. He had already been hurting, and when the worst moment of his life happened in an instant, he was not equipped because he was 14 and because nobody had been able to reach him in time to find another way through. So what does 21 Savage reacting to this actually look like? It looks like a man who put out a statement, not about himself, but about Lyric. It looks like a man who asked for privacy during the most painful stretch of his personal life. And it looks like a man who, in the middle of all of that grief, still pointed at the systemic issue and asked his community to do better. That is the reaction. Quiet, intentional, heavy. We are asking you to do one thing coming out of this video, fam. Not a subscription, not a notification bell. We will get to that in a second. We are asking you to take the Shirley family's request seriously. If you know a young person in your community who is carrying grief, who has seen violence, who has been through something traumatic, and is trying to act like it is not affecting them, check on them. Not once. Keep checking. Ask them directly how they are doing, and actually wait for the real answer, because the warning signs are not always loud. Sometimes they are quiet the way 7 must have been quiet, absorbing loss after loss after loss. Until one terrible afternoon when it all became too much, the family that loved 7 did not fail him. The systems around him did. And the only way those systems change is if enough people in enough communities decide that it is a priority before the next tragedy forces the conversation. Rest in peace, 7 Shirley, 14 years old, gone too soon, and deserving of every conversation this story has started. Prayers for Lyric on her recovery, physical and emotional. Prayers for Sharon Smith and the entire Shirley family navigating an unimaginable season of loss. And prayers for 21 Savage as he moves through this grief the same way the rest of his family does, one day at a time, carrying something no amount of fame makes lighter. If any part of this story is sitting heavy with you right now, please reach out to someone you trust. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is there if you need it. Call or text 988 anytime, any day. You do not have to carry it alone. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us how you feel about this story and what conversations you think need to happen in communities dealing with youth trauma and gun access. This one matters. And if you are not already subscribed to this channel, hit that button and turn on notifications, because we cover stories like this one with the depth and the respect they deserve. We will see you in the next one.